next couple of months. And that one, I think actually it will come. Oh, cool. Yeah, I think that's okay. All right, because we cannot switch selling immediately. Okay, then you know the structure. Okay, we can see how you go. Form just need to fill it out. Oh, yeah, you need to get some kind of evaluation form. Yeah. There's
the MGSM Cup, which is the first ever intra-debate competition conducted in MGSM. And the winners get their all big prizes and a chance to be a part of the Sydney debate, the great debate participation. So we thought that why not get a subject matter expert who can educate us about how to debate better. As we all know, today is the last day to register your team, maybe the individual or in a whole form team. And from next day onwards, we will have elimination rounds and work our way up towards the final of the cup, which will be the 8th week. So quite exciting right now. But to build it up, truly educational, we have some prepared speeches. We have two prepared speeches, as Sue said. One is a special icebreaker by one newly found Toastmaster member. Just to quickly tell you about icebreaker speeches, it is step one of every Toastmaster into the community. It's a welcome session for him, and it's a way of celebrating his membership by telling him that you introduce yourself and your skills to all of the club. Now, over here, before I call out first Toastmaster to give icebreaker, I would like to pose a question to you all. Do you know why is it called an icebreaker? Just to give you a hint, there's a real reason behind why is it called breaking ice. Anybody know? Any guesses though? We recommend you to give up silly and funny answers as the icebreaker for today. Sorry, please.
This is like a cold environment where most of the people are quiet, not sure what they're doing, kind of it's very in a cold environment where someone actually trying to make the environment friendly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're very right on it. I'll get back to you, but I think she last has to say something.
I think just said what I want to say that in terms of ensuring that a person is more familiar with the family of Toastmasters.
Right. You got it absolutely right. Any more guesses? We're looking for some funny answers. These guys are way on point. They're like,
the very first time I came to Australia and came to the Toastmasters Club, I was actually looking for ice somewhere in the break.
Sorry, keep our rooms very spacious so you can spot you work there. But it's absolutely right. The whole idea, if you ever heard that you do a cold call to people, like a cold sales call, is the idea that you do not know the person and you try to communicate an idea. Similarly, over here you've taken a step ahead saying, to break the call between you, increase your warmth, metaphorically, and then you get to know each other. So let's welcome our first prepared speech publisher today. Publisher at the beginning is icebreaker. Publisher?
Yeah, thank you, Liz. And I want to thank you, Sue. I got initial inspiration from Sue to do this talk while I was attending the orientation session for and Maria is not here, but I would like to give her specific thanks because she helped me a lot with all membership stuff. There were some programs which she was able to figure out, and then I got the membership, but I'm on my path. My name is Pavitra Bandari. I'm from Nepal, and I'm a full-time student of MBA here at MGSM. And this is my first time I started organizing behavior and strategy training. In my work experience, I have also assumed some of the key leadership positions, and I have seen how communication is very essential for building relations and also for the organizational effectiveness. I did use my communication skill to improve my performance, but I do see a lot of avenues for me to improve my communication skill, and that is the reason I have joined MGSM Communication Club as well as this Toastmaster Club. Interestingly, I'm from Nepal, but I have never worked in Nepal. My all work experience has been outside Nepal. I started my career actually from India, technical study from there, and by now I have almost 7.5 years of experience. I also have done 3.5 years what we call internship, that is compulsory internship under CPA India program. In India it is called yeah, I see. And initially I have worked in the private sector and also worked for financial consultants from later on I changed to not-for-profit sector, and then finally my last job was to United Nations Myanmar. I have worked in India and then Nigeria and then finally Myanmar. So this has also given me opportunity to travel various countries, and then I found I really love traveling. Traveling for me in a way that I can explore various culture, and it also provides me an opportunity to think differently from different perspectives, and obviously it's also an opportunity to read inside yourself, refresh, and then start your pieces again. I do have other hobbies also. I enjoy keeping myself updated with global news. I like to also study about history, and I'm also interested in global economics. When I decided to join MGSM Community Club as a Research Master Club, I would say I have broadly three goals in my mind. That I want to improve communication skill so that I will be able to deliver my skills very clearly. Use communication skill to develop more engaging conversation, which is more long-lasting and very quality. And also use communication skill for negotiation, negotiation skill. I do have identified my, I would say, whether I want to improve, and also I have clear set of goals, so I think I will be able to achieve my objective. And I also look forward to exacting and very interesting reaction on what we talk about here. And I'm very thankful for all of you. I could still listening very attentively. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Oliver. And instead of Ashley, I'll be presenting the evaluation to you today. Well, firstly, hearty congratulations on giving your first speech at Toastmasters. I have stood here and given my icebreaker, and believe me, it's quite a chilling experience and you did it pretty well. Let's start with general comments on what you excelled at. One thing for a starter, you were looking at all your audience, you looked across the hall. That was a very nice thing. It helps every audience be included in it, and you get a good feel that you are talking to us. It's a very important skill, and you did it pretty well. One thing was you knew what you had to say, so there were very less ums, ahs, I'm sure there were, but they were very less. And it came across as a confident speech, which is very important, that you could talk very clearly. One more thing you did pretty good was you were right on point of what you had to say. There was no moving around. There was no unnecessary lingering comments, which helped us know what you wanted to say. Second, last thing I think which was done pretty well was your pronunciation was clear, so you could get your point pretty well. Some things we feel you might want to work on is your body language. I feel when you stand restricted, it seems like it gives a different signal. So it was quite contradictory to your confident speech, which you were continuous at, your pronunciation, but your body language suggested otherwise. The stage is all yours. You could move around, you could have minor power hand gestures like, I believe, I want to do. Restrict yourself in a nice space, don't go overboard, but that's one thing. Another thing was you had a similar tone to up, which though your content covered up to help us listen to you, but a little bit of, I love travel, could have really picked on people's attention and help you come across, take your point across to everyone. Or, I had 7 years of good working experience as a very different tone to it. One more thing we can definitely try is, as I said, with your tone, your voice throw. I'm pretty sure you were audible to the last portion, but the throw has a different impact. It helps the listener get to the emotion of what you're trying to say. So try to walk with your throw. Lastly, I feel if you could structure your speech a little differently, when you said you like traveling, if there was a nice story about how you traveled across Myanmar, some rainforest over there, and you had a nice adventure out there, or maybe a nice beautiful experience, it just doesn't help me know about you, but know you a little more of a person. That's some interest which we can get into it. But believe me, for an icebreaker, it will be really nice. Last thing, to challenge yourself. If you can just package your story a little differently, add a few interesting details, along with statements and points of care and experience. That would be one thing. And the second thing is definitely your body language and usage of the whole stage. That would be what I think we can definitely work upon. And thank you so much. Right. Well, moving on, we had one prepared speech. Now, that was from an icebreaker's point of view. Now, moving on to a little guest speaking what we have today from John. John Zavavia is our alumni, and he has a very interesting story to us. He wants to talk to us about something from a child's lens. We all have grown up, we all are doing an MBA, we all have reached solutions, and we all have our own complexities in life. But here is John who wants to talk to us in a very different perspective, the perspective of a child. So let's welcome John.
Thank you so much. Thank you all tonight. Well, tonight we're talking about a kid's story. But at the end of the day, we are all people, whether it be a child, parent, any particular person. We've all grown up with kid stories and fairy tales. These are stories that we've come across since we were a child and they've been brought across from generation to generation. What we don't realise, though, is that there is meaning behind these stories. These stories have been around for hundreds of years. And moving a step further, we come across all these things across our daily lives, whether it be education, advertising, business, government, even religion. Without today's story, it would be purely a simple briefing. It means nothing. But the story brings it to life. And hence the power of the parable. Allow me to give you an example. Have you ever wondered what the story was behind Pinocchio's long nose and his lying? Well, perhaps it was acted as a lesson. And in the act of lying, he couldn't eat, he couldn't grow, he couldn't leave his room. He was literally housebound. And the story behind that is he cannot grow with lying. But the story behind it makes it more believable. It makes it more real in life. Perhaps allow me to tell you another story.
Explain yourself. I'm afraid I can't explain myself, sir. Because I'm not myself, you know.
I do not know.
Well, I can't do it any more clearly for it is clear to me.
You. Who are you?
Well, don't you think you ought to tell me who you are first?
Alice in Wonderland was conceived back in 1870. That's one story too much there. So Alice in Wonderland was conceived back in 1865. And it's significant today with its chaotic narrative. And also the mark of Alice's curiosity. And how this adjoins to our own life, to our own journey. This is what we're talking to you about today. The story of Alice and its lead to the chaos of our lives. So, among you, who has heard of Alice in Wonderland? Okay, practically everybody. So, for those who have, this is an opportunity for you to rekindle some of the narratives. And for those who haven't, it's an opportunity to spark your curiosity
as I'll be going through the main parts of the story. But before I go any further, let's talk about the word curiosity. Have you ever wondered about some of our major achievements, or what you see every day, how it all came about? Perhaps, for example, the Sydney Harbour Bridge, our quest for space, building towers that reach the heavens. This is all came about because of our curiosity, because somebody decided to say the words, why? And it's from our curiosity it makes this so interesting. And also Aristotle also said, you're human by nature to have the desire to know, to be curious of your surroundings. Again, when everything goes wrong, we always ask the first question, why? This is just sort of curiosity that is reaching out to you. And this is why Alice in Wonderland is so interesting to us. It's interesting about the story of Alice in Wonderland. It is set in the forest. Stories about forests have a bit of an intriguing sound to it. It makes it more interesting. It's not quite like a garden, isn't it? Where everything is so abundant and lush, like the Garden of Eden. No, it's a forest. When we come across stories of forests, the trials and tribulations, perhaps of Hansel and Gretel, another example, Red Riding Hood, where the forest represents a journey, and a journey through what is called the precipice of danger. We ask ourselves many questions when we go through a forest. And that's what makes it very interesting about this particular story. You saw earlier that Alice was exchanging the caterpillar. Alice was struggling to answer a simple question. Who are you? Perhaps this tells us that when we, among our own forest of doubt, we tend to question ourselves. We question our abilities, whether we can achieve these things. But also we question other people without having much idea about who we are. Alice had stumbled across a Cheshire cat, and her curiosity was sparked. She actually was wanting to find the white rabbit in the film, and she asked the cat for directions. But the cat, and she said to the cat, "Please direct me away from the madness of the forest." But the cat said to her, "Doesn't matter where you go, there will always be madness around. And no matter where you go, you will always come across mad people." Oh, sorry, I didn't put sorry. Maybe there's a similar, I'm not quite sure. But, and that's the interesting part about Wonderland. Everywhere is mad wherever you go. And then it tells us that chaos is always around us. Speaking from Jordan Peterson, professor of psychology and author, he mentions that order and chaos go hand in hand. One cannot survive without the other. And putting it among more worldly symbols, perhaps the polarity of the Star of David. Up the top is masculinity and the bottom is femininity, both on opposite sides. You've also got the twin cobras with their tails entwined together as order and chaos. And finally, you've got the yin and yang, the two eyes of the serpent with two different colours in parallel to each other as order and chaos. It's a simple dichotomy of life. The better we are at managing order and chaos together as one, the more fulfilled we will be within our lives. So Alice was then forced to meet the Mad Hatter. At first she was very apprehensive about it, but in the end it wasn't really that big of a deal. It wasn't as bad as she thought. That's another thing to come across. We tend to think the worst of people before we even meet them or know who they are. Professor of psychiatry and author Daniel Siegel also mentions our evolutionary history of feeding ourselves against saber-toothed tigers, that we have developed a negative bias and we build our own negative hierarchies, mental hierarchies, when in social situations, that we think the worst of things, and that brings us trauma and anxiety. But then, after meeting with the Mad Hatter, Alice was spent. She was angry, and now her anger turns into tears. She is spent, she wants to go home. Her curiosity is ended. And then, at the time of her need, the Cheshire Cat reappears and asks her to seek the Red Queen for directions. But then what had occurred is further madness.
she was forced into a further crazy situation, being given inadequate resources to play croquet with the flamingo as a mount. But she had to toe the line, because if she did not, it would be off with her head. It's funny about that. There's also other ways of saying about this in the corporate world. Perhaps hitting the ground running. And in addition to that, another one could be being thrown in the deep end. What's your idea? We've all been put that in a corporate situation. Being thrown in the deep end, hitting the ground running is a common saying. But then what we can learn from Alice today is that it was her courage that she is given the ultimate grant to wake up from her dream. And just when the balance of order and chaos was getting too much for her, she was allowed to wake up. There's a slight contradiction to the story, because not always we're allowed to wake up from our nightmares, and not always our voices are heard. But this also tells us that we should be mindful of our curiosity, let it guide us. And to end today, I'd also like to mention to you that perhaps our curiosity is a casualty, our doubt is a casualty of our curiosity. And perhaps the more that we doubt, the more curious we are. I'll leave that with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Thanks a lot. I believe with John's speech, everyone is really curious about a lot of things, and that's what I want to end. To evaluate John's speech, if we could have David. Thank you, David.
Really, I've enjoyed John's presentation today. Excellent. It goes to show that John had a very engaged presentation and a story that he shared. And so I'd like to share with you all what I found that made his speech very effective and very engaging tonight. So to start off with, did you notice the very first slide he had up there was a blank white slide? What that allowed John to do was grab the attention of the audience straight away. Doesn't let us start the introduction, but start with John speaking himself. And that's a great way to connect with the audience and then engage with everyone, making sure that you start very strong. So John was that very first speech time. Secondly, John had a really clear takeaway message in his presentation tonight, and that was all around curiosity and how we can explore that as well. And he gave us a number of different examples throughout his speech and presentation. So what are some of the things that we can look at from John's presentation that perhaps we can improve on for next time? The first one I have is when you're giving presentation slides and then you have that transitional moment between slides to video. It's a bit of a, I guess, what we can call an important song, where we have others coming in and making a switch from range to range. So it's a skill to have to be able to build that pause, but building that song through pages as well, from commentaries to make sure that you have that constant engagement with the audience throughout your entire speech. That's a small skill. We will have all to be very mindful. So that is something we'll John to be mindful and that will next time and deliver a presentation or something. Secondly, what I'd like to see John do next time is, while we have very good effective use of the slide, sometimes the pacing between each slide is very quick and can be sometimes hard to keep up with. So I'd like John to experiment some more pausing on some of the slides to give that variability so that the interest and engagement with the audience and the running very smoothly. So it doesn't really fast things going on, and then you just slow it down and bring that audience back into go. And lastly, what was the best part about John's presentation tonight? Well, what I really liked was the use of his slides. There was no text, there was no words on it, and they're all just pictures. And that's complemented his speaking style of what he had to share. And that is always something
Thank you, David, and everybody. That was the first half of our session today. And we will take a quick short break and we'll resume at 7:20. You're all completely networking and you are with your own time. We will resume back with the next session at 7:20. So let's have it back then. Thank you.
that'd be better. No, we're going to talk about the about the Thank you. Sorry. There's a few books in there. There's a few books, but one of the main books was called Curiosity by Curiosity, and the author is it's very, it's quite a detailed read, but it is very engaging. It talks about a whole bunch of different stuff.
No, it happens. You get into a block, and once you're up there, it's really hard to unchain. No, yes. Sure. Believe me. Icebreakers. So let's do one thing. After the session, we both just basically back it up because if you want to be a member, you can just talk please do it. Please do it. But if you can get it, you can do it. So earlier before this tour, I was speaking in the Housing Club, and I was changing to speaking yeah.
why are you saying places international? You have done your like 3 years of experience. Have you taken the CA final? You haven't taken the CA final. So you are a full-fledged CA. So it's like with CA, it's like Institute of Chartered Accountants, it is recognized in India also, right? So here you are saying CA, is it valid? Yeah. How is the exam? I would like to take it. CA, I know. I don't know about CA. I'm going to take CA.
Hi! Seems too quiet, so I'll go. Okay, thanks, Ashley. No worries. Now we'll commence our second half session. And now I'd like to introduce Randal for our education on social today.
Thank you. Cool. Thank you. Some of you I know, some of you I don't know. For those of you who don't know me, I run a program here which is called Persuasion and Rhetoric in Management now. The original title, which was called Public Performance Management, wasn't my title. Of course, it's given me by the university, and I suggested it needed to be renamed, so they renamed it. But obviously, the person who renamed it doesn't know really much about rhetoric. Because there is a basic problem with the name Persuasion and Rhetoric in Management. Any idea what the problem is? Rhetoric is persuasion. Yeah, pretty much. So it's persuasion in management, or rhetoric in management. But anyway, it's a nice thing to be able to start talking about terminologies of learning lessons if you haven't already done on today's course. Okay, so I'm here to talk to you about what it takes to win a debate. So what does it take to win a debate? Put that up to you. What does it take to win a debate?
Better argument.
Better arguments, okay?
Research is important.
Research, okay? Yeah?
Linking emotions.
Linking to emotion, okay?
Good logic.
Good logic.
You are thorough with the topic. You are thorough with the topic so that you know the favors and the against.
Cool, okay, yeah, throw the topic, yep.
You're able to counter the other and diffuse the other party.
Okay, so you counter argue?
Yeah.
Yep. This is all good stuff.
You convince the other person that you're right.
You convince the other person that you're right.
That's
Okay?
Did you know it? No, it is Poland.
You should throw it in comments.
We just
It's
had a
very
conversation
long.
about this last week.
Yeah, it's very long. Okay. Anything else? Yes?
The motion, or the points that you're trying to,
The proposition?
the proposition.
Yeah.
Actually, we had a conversation about this, about argument for throwing debate that was going on.
Yep.
And I always say you have to make sure you argue the proposition that is on the table and not what you think.
Cool.
And what was the style of the presentation, style of an argument, how you're delivering this thing? That's really
Okay. Well, Toastmasters delivery seems to be really important. It is important. Short point. I can say to you now that if you've got a very bad adjudicator or adjudicators who have no idea what they're doing, which is often sometimes the case in kind of informal debating situations, then how charming and charismatic you are can win the debate. But if it's a proper debate, where you've got proper adjudicators, it almost never wins the debate. What they're looking for more than anything else is your ability to deliver a good argument. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. Here's the deal. All of the things you said are right. But the real answer to what it takes to win a debate is this: that you can persuade an audience that you're right. That's all that it takes to win a debate. And now we need to understand a couple of things about this. Firstly, who's your audience in the debate? Yeah, not your opposition. So your adjudicators and the audience that have come along to hear you debate are the people that you are there to convince. They're the ones that you are to persuade them that you're right. Not that anything else is happening, or even that the proposition's right. Just that you're right. And the second thing is that convincing an audience that you're right isn't logical, it isn't emotional. There is, in rhetoric, there is in persuasion, no such thing as being right. There is no such thing as truth. Just simply a perception of truth, a presence of truth in the audience's mind. So what we've got to do, really, if we're going to win a debate, is not worry about our opposition so much. We certainly will never convince them, because it's their job not to be convinced. In fact, their job is to make the audience think that you're wrong. And so that's going to be occurring while you're speaking. You're also going to be doing it, unlike you would do with when I'm trying to convince my wife that we should go and see a movie or change our diet or something like that. Do something different, then I'm not going to get that counter argument from somebody else, and I'm certainly not going to be measured by anybody else in terms of my argument. So apart from this counter argument from a debating team whose job it is to destroy you, and the fact that there is an adjudicator whose job it is to evaluate you, a debate is just persuasion. A debate is trying to convince an audience to come to the point of view themselves that the speaker is right. It is all about the audience. It is all about them. If you've been in my course in public performance, or if you've been in my course on persuasion, or if you've actually taken any time to read anything around this area, you'll realise that audience centricity is what wins arguments, is what wins debates. Okay, so for too many years now, I've been teaching this, but I've also been a speechwriter for many years for not so much politicians anymore, but certainly for executives and for others. I have worked on many major bids for companies to help them persuade others to actually say yes to their services and their products. And all of that experience, plus my research into this field, tells me that there is one thing that is true, and that is that all persuasion is self-persuasion. Persuasion exists in the minds of the audience. It doesn't exist necessarily in the persona of the speaker or the words of the speaker. Having said that, though, we need to use all of those to actually get our audience to start thinking. And it's a thinking process that we're going to work through tonight. So what we're going to look at is, we're going to look at the idea of this, if you like, a broad strategy of debate. We're not going to look at the tactics of debating tonight, because we haven't really got a lot of time to do that, although we will cover some of them. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the strategy of debating, and we're going to look at a part of Aristotle's 5 canons. By the way, if you haven't seen this before, Aristotle kind of wrote a book on this. Well, in fact, he did write a book on this. Aristotle kind of told us everything we need to know about persuasion, and if you want to study Aristotle, you'll be studying him for a long time. There is so much material out there. But one of the things that I really like is this process he gave us, what he called the 5 canons of persuasion. And it works like this. When we're developing any kind of an argument, we first need to deal with invention. I'll come back to what invention means in some more detail in a moment. We then need to think about how we're going to arrange our argument, what points we're going to put, first, second, third, fourth, and so on. We're going to need to think about the figurative style and linguistic style. This is not just your delivery style. It's not really talking about what you do with your eye contact and your gestures. This is more about the style of language that is being used. We also need to memorise what we're going to talk about, and ideally work without a script. And we also need to think very carefully about how we deliver all of the things that we've decided earlier. So the delivery is the culmination of all of that. It's not the first place you start. My experience with debaters, novice debaters, is that they worry way too much about the delivery.
Their focus is first and foremost about how I'm going to stand up in front of this group of people and not be nervous and not and all that sort of stuff. This is a great place to practice not doing it. But in a debate, that's not your concern. Your concern is always about how the audience is thinking. So the way to do that, I think, is to actually really explore this idea of invention. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this idea of invention, and we're going to break it down into its component parts. We're going to look at how we construct an argument. We're going to look at how we refute an argument. I'm going to get you to actually develop some arguments. I'm going to give you a proposition, and we'll see if we can do a little bit of a kind of mock debate, if you like, with the time that I've got. Are you doing my cards for me? You should, because we'll be here Okay, so let's talk about this invention by defining debate a little bit more. So a debate is essentially just a formalised argument. That's all it is. So we can define it this way. We can think about it in three ways. Firstly, a debate involves proof. What's proof? Could be? Yeah. Well, no, it is, actually. Yes. What else is it?
It forms the bedrock of what I am going to talk about to rebut the opposition.
Okay, good.
Actually, the end point of what we're deriving.
The end point and what you derive? Okay. That's it.
It can be repeated.
Proof. Yeah, well, proof is.
That's how you direct it.
Yeah, pretty much. Now, proof, Aristotle said there are three proofs. There is logos, pathos,
See? Oh my god, I talked about it.
and ethos. In other words, we have logical proofs, we have emotional proofs appealing to audiences' values, and we have ethical proof, which is proof that exists from the source that is providing the information. So these three proofs can all be manipulated, they can all be utilised, but they have to come from the perspective of the audience again. So proof is essentially in what's proof to you may not be proof to me. I might say to you, 97% of climate scientists tell us that the Earth is warming because of human activity. And you might, if you listen to 2GB every morning, say, well, that's not, there are 1,000 scientists who can argue that that's not happening, and I don't believe that 97% of the scientists are all on the gravy train collecting their... yeah. Et cetera, et cetera. So you might not accept 97% of scientists finding that that's as proof. You might find that scientists are all a bunch of wankers. You've been to university, you know what they're like. And so why would you believe any of that? So proof is the first thing, and it's really critical that we get this right from the audience's perspective. And we'll look at the idea of developing our arguments within these areas. The second thing is similar in a way. It's a funny word called enthemy. Now, Aristotle talked about this as being supplying the missing thoughts of the speaker. This is where the audience supplies the missing thoughts of the speaker. Essentially what happens here is, do you know about the three-part syllogism? You heard of this before? So a three-part syllogism is, do you know the Socrates one?
I'm not telling them. Never done your class.
Okay, so a three-part syllogism is essentially a form of logic. And it works like this. It says, all men are born. Okay? So this is a statement that applies to all men, all humans. Okay? Would you disagree with that? We're all going to die, right? Unless you're God or something, you're all going to die. Or I can't ask you next time we figure it out sooner or later. Or they're all going to die. Socrates is a man. Therefore, so there's a general, a specific, and a conclusion, which is Socrates is mortal. In other words, Socrates will die. So if you accept that all men are mortal, you must accept that Socrates is also mortal because Socrates is a man. Now you probably don't need to say that second one, do you? If we know we're talking about Socrates, you probably don't need to say, oh, and Socrates is a man, because it's evidently true to the audience. So what we can do is we can probably just ignore that and say, well, all men are mortal, so Socrates is mortal too. In other words, we can drop part of the syllogism because we know that the audience will provide it. We can drop the second statement because we know that the audience already possesses that information and will supply it anyway. In other words, we include our audience in our argument. This is really critical to understand, because we'll come back to this later. The last one here is what's called cognitive dissonance. Now, this is a psychological term. It was developed back in the 1950s by a guy by the name of Festinger, and essentially it works like this. Human beings aren't really very good. This goes to something like John was talking about. Human beings aren't very good with uncertainty. We do not like certain uncertainty. We will do everything we can to try and avoid uncertainty. We want things to be the way we expect them to be. And so when things aren't the way we expect them to, when things are uncertain, we actually have a psychological and physiological distress that we need to get rid of in some way. So anytime things are uncertain, something really interesting happens. When you find yourself in a position of uncertainty, when that big saber-toothed tiger is in front of you, what do? What happens to you? You scream? Panic streak? Physiological reaction? You pee yourself? Well, maybe you don't. Maybe some do. I don't know.
Maybe your heart rate goes up.
I pee myself. But then again, Kaminsky method. If you've seen that show. Don't you start thinking about how do I get myself out of this? You immediately are aware. Every sense is on spot. Everything is, you're starting to see more in your peripheral vision. You're starting to pick up clues you hadn't picked up. Your adrenaline's pumping into your brain's on fire. Every sense is tingling, being aware of what it needs to try and do to escape that threat. So what ends up happening is when we have uncertainty, the really interesting thing is that humans start thinking. And so uncertainty is one of those things that we want to try and do in debates. We want to work with this level of uncertainty. If we can create uncertainty about the opposition's point of view, for example, we can win our debate. So a debate essentially is about offering proof. It's about working with the audience and understanding what they already understand, those things that they already know. And it's about making sure that they are left in a position of uncertainty about any other point of view except yours. So, how do we go about doing this way? The first thing is an invention, which is defined by Aristotle as essentially finding in any situation or any issue the available means of persuasion. And when he talks about proof, for example, he says anything that proves your point. It could be statistics, it could be facts, it could be personal experience, anything that proves your point. It doesn't have to just be facts. Those of you doing MBA, it doesn't have to be facts and statistics. By the way, what's a fact? About off-site. What's a fact? In an MBA program, you should know this.
I think fact is what's been acknowledged by people.
Okay. Which means?
When truth is not necessarily acknowledged by people.
Okay.
That's how I see
Okay.
Fact is somewhat a universal truth that has been derived out of some random experiments which have been repeated.
Okay.
With repetitive results.
It used to be in the United States, probably still is to some people, that a universal truth was that there were some people who were made differently by God than other people. And those other people, or those lesser species, were able to be slaves. There were scientific experiments that were showing that those Africans that they brought into the country were lesser people than the whites. And that was proven by, so there was a common place that the Africans were not the same as us, they were a lower species, and there was scientific evidence to suggest that was the case. So that's true then.
That's not true. I mean,
This is why you never answered.
Alright, so you see the problem we've got here is that proof exists in the eyes of the audience, and it will change depending on your audience. It will tend to change depending on the context. It will change depending on the situation over time that you might find yourself in. Proof is anything that proves your case from an audience's perspective. It's what's going on in your audience's mind that's important. Just by the way, on the MBA program, here's a very simple way of defining what a fact is. A fact is anything that your lecturer has told you.
Or for an essay, anything written in a journal.
Okay. So in terms of invention, we're going to look at the resources we've got for invention. We're going to look at starting to get old. And my third class, refutation. Okay, so we're going to look at the resources, the elements, and refutation. Tonight, we're not going to be able to look at those things. We're going to just focus on this issue of invention, which, by the way, in my experience, is 80% of the time you spend on it working up your brain anyway. So invention does a number of different things. Firstly, an invention, when we're looking at an invention, it works from the idea of public memory. So what I was talking about with Abisham, I can never get my tongue around your name the first
You can
time.
call me Abhi.
Abi?
Yeah.
Thank you. We're talking about with the slavery issue with Adi, is that public memory, it really is what's going on in terms of how people understand things. And what we're talking about here are common truths that exist at the moment for this particular audience. Things like commonplaces, things like maxims, those sorts of ideas that people we know will accept become really important. So the more we can work with public memory, the more we can work with what we know. The more we work with what we know the audience understands and accepts, the more we're going to be successful. So when we're talking about, somebody said research before, research is being really important. The research, first and foremost, is not about the topic. The research is what does the audience understand and accept about this topic or about this proposition. We can also think about the idea of elements. Now, elements of arguments, I'll go into some detail about the elements of arguments, but these are essentially understanding the difference between claims and support and whether the audience is going to accept those claims and support. We're going to do a bit of work on that. And then the last thing is this idea of refutation. What is refutation? When you refute something, what do you do?
Credibility. Credibility?
You need to have credibility to do a good reputation, but not necessarily.
You disagree?
You disagree? Well, not necessarily. It really doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree with your opposition. In fact, as I'll argue, is you should probably agree with your opposition. Well, hold it.
Oh, you're saying refutation of the sorry.
Yeah,
Refutation.
I confused
Not
between reputation.
Sorry, yeah, refutation. So,
What if you to come up with another idea where they cannot make them to think uncertain about it?
yes.
Okay.
So refutation is all about creating uncertainty. Cool. So when we're talking about refutation here, once again, we're working on this idea of uncertainty. We're not trying to prove our opposition wrong. We're trying to get the audience to consider that they may be wrong, that there is uncertainty about their position. You so doubt. You know, in court, this idea of the proof beyond an unreasonable doubt, which is unreasonable to expect unreasonable doubt. But, you know, the idea is if you've got any doubt at all, you must acquit. And it's kind of the same thing in debate. All right, so when we're starting to talk about this, this idea of invention, there are a number of things that we can start to think about in terms of public memory, in terms of thinking about the various elements of the reputation. When we're starting to think about this, we can start to think about the ideas of how do we actually define what we're talking about? What are the elements of definition for this particular topic? We can start thinking about how do we divide it up? How do we actually break it down into its pieces, which we're going to do. We can think about how do we think of establishing it in the minds of the audience through comparison. If they don't know anything about this topic, about this proposition, if they have no prior knowledge, understanding and acceptance, are there comparable things that we can use to actually get them to accept it and to understand it? And is there any relationship between various items and so on, as you'll see? Okay, so let's pause there for a second. So what do we think, given that, what do we think debating is all about?
Two sides of an argument which you say what is one section the people are saying this is right and this is one viewpoint.
Yeah.
Other side is the refutation side, doing things in creating that uncertainty not be right.
Okay, cool.
Creating uncertainty in the mind of the audience.
Almost. There's a bit more to it than that. You're right, there's a bit more to that. Got to be the last person standing. Yeah, every other pin knocked out. Almost. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Well, creating uncertainty in the minds of the audience by utilizing your own perception of truth.
Yep. So we want to create uncertainty in the minds of the audience by
providing some
social evidence.
providing an acceptable alternative. Yeah, that works for me. So the idea is that you want to establish proof in your audience's mind. You want to create uncertainty about their current position, about their opposition, about your opposition's arguments, and you need to provide certainty in your arguments for them. And the only way you can do that is by understanding your audience. So just a little bit on this debate, who's going to be the adjudicators on the MBS debate? This is not MGSM debate. Yes,
you can. You'll be yourself.
I felt like you agreed to this, but
I think I did, yeah.
And Philip Pron and Philip Pron. I think we should look her up.
Right, okay. I've never met Philip.
Okay.
So that'd be interesting. Yep.
And also thinking to external.
Okay.
They're two or one external.
Is there it would be, I don't know what Philip knows about formal debate adjudication, but it would be good if you could find somebody who actually has that process down pat. So if there's somebody in Toastmasters who's in debate, out of university debating, or perhaps even out of university debating club here, they're pretty good there and have to contact them.
your best option,
I want to do it.
to be honest, I was the best option for providing an educational, so never
Okay. So I was the second best option?
No, I had to stand in because you weren't available. That's terrible.
Okay.
Can
All
I
right.
make a suggestion?
Yes, ma'am.
I wouldn't mind if we call it skilling. Skilling, yeah.
Yep.
Sorry about the pronunciation.
That's okay.
But,
It wouldn't worry me what you call it, but don't worry.
but that's, I think, yeah, I think that might be, but again, I think the,
Ask him.
I have.
You have? He said no?
Yeah.
Okay. That's his first answer to most things.
That's how you get
That's how you get random.
I'll ask him.
Yeah, okay.
I'm probably going to know too, so I'll ask him. Okay. All right.
Sorry, Randall,
Yep.
may I ask a question?
Please do.
Just building on some other stuff that we talked about last fortnight. Just in terms of the, so we had, making sure that your audience understands your alternative, your acceptable alternative. Is there an affirmative or a negative that's responsible for creating a new state, for example? So an acceptable alternative as in a new model or something like that? Is there?
There is. In fact, it's one of the kind of debate things is to redefine what you're talking about. You don't want to get into a battle of definitions, which can happen. But one of the things in debating is the term stasis. And whatever the current stasis is, which is usually what your audience currently understands and accepts, one of the teams at least has to change that. It may be a debate proposition that everybody's going to accept straight off. If you get the affirmative position, then you've got the hardest job because you've got to maintain the status quo. You've got to keep them thinking that way. which is really difficult. Whereas most people think the other side is the bad one. It's the easiest one to take on.
It's, we actually got it interesting. So last year, so Tejas and myself,
Yes.
Yeah, from the team last year, we actually had a proposition that was a negative that we were the affirmative for.
Right.
Yeah. So it was a badly written
Yeah.
proposition. But some of the feedback was that we had to provide, we were the affirmative, and we had to provide a new model.
Yep.
As well. So I was just trying to understand.
Okay. So I call that reframing. Is to find a way in which you can reframe or frame the issue in some way. We'll talk a little bit about reframing if we've got time at the end of this. Yep. But yeah, I think you should do. Okay. Well, with that, let's start with the debate topic. I'm going to divide you into some debate teams, and you don't need to actually meet on this. We're just going to do some personal development here. So this side of the room, I'm going to make it completely imbalanced. So this side of the roof, these two tables and these two tables, you are the affirmative. Okay? So you're going to argue for the proposition. I'm just going to get you to do some piece of paper. You're going to need a pencil and paper, and I'm just going to get you to write some stuff down. And that makes you the negative for this Oxford debating. No way.
Oh. We'll take it. We'll let you roll it in the
So, whoever's selecting the debate topics, which type of debating are you doing? Are you doing parliamentary or Oxford? Okay. In an Oxford debating, okay. In Oxford debating, the proposition should always be phrased in the affirmative. Okay. So here's the debate proposition. Okay, so that's your debate proposition. Okay, that's all right. I usually have a walk out at least much earlier than this, but that's fine.
See you guys.
Okay, so what I'd like you to do is your side. What I mainly want you to do is to think about what's your first step. What are you going to do?
Sit down and look at your audience.
Okay. So who is our audience going to be? So let's take the MGSM, MBS, MQBS.
Intro debate. It's got about 5 names. It's got an intro debate. That's what these guys are calling it.
Intro. So it's internal. So it's just you guys debate. Yeah.
This is the prep before the great debate.
Oh, right.
Debate
Yeah,
6.
so it's only MGSM and QBS.
What a great idea. Okay, cool. Have you got much of an audience coming on?
Hopefully, yes.
When are you doing this debate? When's it happening?
Yeah,
30th, 31st?
That's not my place, I think 13th of August.
13th of
Wednesday,
August.
same day.
Okay.
Date might be wrong, but it's Wednesday.
And then the great
August
debate.
and
That's why we're doing it this way, to see what we've got. And then
Okay.
we'll form it in.
Okay. Okay. All right. So just thinking, when's the big debate?
October. Generally, they haven't finalised it yet.
So what we could do, if you're interested, is you could come along and do a practice debate before the big one in my class in front of an audience. Critique it. Think about it. Okay. All right. Cool. It's a 10-week program that I'm doing in term 4. All right. So what's the first thing you're going to do? Think about the audience. Who's the audience? What do we know about the audience? They're MBA students in theory. What? Tell me about them. Explain them to me. Describe them.
You need to understand the cohort, which part of the country do they belong to? Like, like when they are talking about imposing tariffs on Chinese imports, we need to understand what kind of population are we basically catering to.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So that's good. But tell me about it. So that's a good question. But tell me about it.
Okay. So they like facts. When you every first time when it compels us to get into facts and support it in another thing.
Yep.
So that's one thing every student wants to hear.
Okay.
How facts play in this picture.
Okay. Cool. Good. What else?
Supposedly they are more aware about this international business practices.
Ah. Yes. And if they do know anything about it, by the time they finish their MBA, they'll have no idea.
They may or may not have a firm opinion about a certain person in that sentence.
Wait, are we not saying his name? He should. He is.
He shall not be named.
Okay.
The Oompa Loompa. Wait.
All right.
So they may be biased.
You guys are the affirmative group.
Oh, we are affirmative.
Yeah, you agree with that?
We are affirmative.
Do you not like agreeing with that? Is that? You don't like it. Okay. So another great man like Aristotle, Albert Einstein said, intelligence is being able to argue a point without holding it personally, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. Okay. So the first thing that you do, absolutely right, is to start thinking about the audience. And what you need to do is to start thinking about the audience's attitudes. You need to start thinking about their values. You need to think about what they know. And potentially what the source of that knowledge is as well. So if you're getting all your knowledge about Donald Trump from Ray Hadley, you've probably got a particular point of view. Or Twitter. Okay. So you need to work out what their attitude is to all of these things. By attitude, I mean their predisposition to act, their abilities, their means that they would vote for this. By values, you're starting to think about what are Australian values, what are values for MBA students, about free trade, market, freedom of markets and all that sort of stuff. You also want to think about their politics in terms of their values. But you also need to understand what they know about. What would we know about tariffs? I'm old enough to remember when a lot of goods had tariffs on them in Australia. What do you know about tariffs?
I know one thing. So I'm from Korea. So I remember that I think still is the case. If you want to import any car other than Hyundai or Kia, which is not manufactured in South Korea, it's exorbitant price you have to pay for. You probably pay triple the amount or whatever what's already expensive. You probably pay a lot more than what you pay for the thing. So that's the consequence of a tariff, that you pay for a hefty price for anything. And then sometimes they show off the fact that, oh, I got this good from the US, right? Oh, you must be rich, right? That kind of thing just starts to come.
Okay. So it makes products less competitive from foreign sources. This is the idea. To inspire the build of local products and sources. So it's often done by populists because it inspires the idea we're going to be, America first and jobs for Americans first and all that sort of stuff. Great. Good idea. Except for all those people in Walmart who've lost their job just recently because of the downturn in their retail sales because their Chinese products aren't coming through at the prices they need and so on and so on. Or at least that's Walmart's excuse.
And the AI bots.
And the AI, And they actually, people aren't losing jobs in America because of China, they're losing it because of robots. Okay. So, what's the next thing we do? Let's put this together in an MBA way. Whenever you get a problem, what's the first step to do with a problem? This is the problem.
Run away.
Google.
It's a very millennial response.
Find it or find what the problem is or what the issue is, understand it.
Yeah, so let's do a bit of a problem solving process here. And the simplest way to do this is to actually do an issues tree. So we put this up and say Australia should follow Trump's lead and impose tariffs on imports. So that's our proposition. And the first thing we do is to say, why? Why should Australia follow Trump's lead and impose tariffs on Chinese imports? and you come up with an answer to that. And you go, why also? And start thinking about alternatives. So what we first do is we look for building breadth of the issue. And then what we can do is when we've got our answer to this, first why is we can have another why. And so on. Until we build our issues tree out here and we start really pulling this apart. Now when we start doing that, we start pulling it apart and we start asking questions about, firstly, why should we follow Trump's lead? What's specifically about his program that is good, bad, or indifferent? Why should we impose tariffs on just Chinese products? Why shouldn't we impose them on other competitive products, like motor vehicles from Germany, for example, and so on and so on and so on. So we can start then to divide and define our topic this way. Let me give you just a quick 2 minutes, see if you can come up with some views on this. Do a bit of an issues tree on this very quickly. I'll give you 2 minutes to do it. See what you can come up with. Remember, you guys are affirmative and you guys are negative. You agree, they don't.
I understood. Oh, that's the idea about why do we need to do what Trump did with the tariffs. That's the most basic baseline we need to do that. Whatever he's done, so I doesn't even know what it is. You can Google it out, don't worry. Okay, by how much? Yeah, so like, that's good. So we know how it affects us. Increasing the board you. Second is because they want to be competitive. What we are, like if we are English importers, then we are answering the wrong way. We are being the biggest importer. We don't even know what we are. We are the last one.
Sometimes you don't have ability to produce the food either efficiently and cheaply. Whereas if you then to sell would be in other areas to produce our buttons. So in Australia we produce fruit and we're trying to wait to consume. So therefore it's good for us to keep them on the jury.
Right, let's try to break it down.
About Australian manufacturing industry
if we do it,
was not necessarily so it was resurrected manufacturing making local products.
no, China,
It was like producing jobs, producing we sold our Swiss, we sold our home, we sold our money, beloved vegetables. It's like only thing that worked our mind. We're selling our mind is going to China. What is that? Let's go with the natural earth and the air.
Let me stop you there. Let me just hear some of the thoughts. How did you get to with the affirmative? What's breaking this down, pulling this argument apart? What have we got?
We kind of first of all broke it down into two and said, why should we follow Trump?
Yep.
And then we wanted to play on hearts and mind and emotional.
So, for example?
So, like, we've lost all our key iconic brands. Golden is gone. We've lost our tin can. We've lost our beloved Swiss.
Okay.
Chinese. There's no more innovation. There's no more development.
Okay.
Everybody's going overseas.
So that's why we should impose tariffs, but it's not why we should follow Trump.
No, that's to follow Trump because he says.
That's the first part. Second part of it, why we should follow Trump is the nationalism. We want to make an Australian way of doing things.
Yep.
The crops in Australia, we have Trump is a good example for that, which is giving that nationalism.
Okay. So make Australia great again.
Bring the manufacturing back, think about the jobs so that we can make an Australian way of working and be part of an Australian blue collar, not be satisfied only with American white collar.
Okay. Cool. Anything else?
Well, Australia and US have been long-term strategic military partners. Recently, Prime Minister Scott Morrison visited US. Ronald Reagan standing by their feeding supermarkets, showing their allegiance to the Donald Trump government, and they say that we are strategic partners, safeguarding Pacific and so on. So imposing tariff is basically in the interest of Donald Trump, and showing that solidarity towards Trump government will also help them back some foreign direct investments from the US to Australia, and also that the fact that the Australian dollar value at this moment is falling, probably forming trade blocks, like countering China will help them form perhaps deep with that for like having trade blocks with US, and that is the reason one point.
Okay, cool. All right, good. Let's go to the opposition. What do you think? What are your thoughts that came out from your first pass of analysis?
Well, we thought, to negate the topic, why shouldn't we follow Trump's lead apart from the fact that he's Donald Trump? Because our dependency on China and how we lack expertise in multiple areas. So it's a better opportunity cost of having it imported from China. So if we start charging them more, it's a loss for us and our economic gains effect. That's the strongest point.
Okay.
And then just kind of went on to it in the details of how it will affect our own prices, and Australians will be affected, and how we should encourage more business here, but the import part can just be a baseline to come here.
Okay, cool. All right, so the first part passed from both sides. You can hear the differing arguments that are coming through here. And the first thing you do when you get a debate is analyse the proposition. Start pulling it apart. This process is a really nice way of starting to really think about what's actually going on in this question or in this proposition and what might the audience think about it. Here's a bit of a structure for doing it in some more detail. There are 4 things that you can do in your analysis, according to Aristotle, once again. And the first is definition, then division, comparison, and relationship. So the first thing is to define what we mean by these terms. And here's an opportunity where we can start to redefine them or reframe some of these ideas. So let's think about, for example, define Trump.
A wealthy man.
Okay? Yep.
The current American president.
The current American president. Yep.
That's a different.
A man who is like narcissist, who uses hard labor tactics to get things done.
Okay. So,
who looks everything in a business perspective, not with some ethics. I mean, there should be some humility, there should be some mission.
not particularly complex thing, the sort of thing we teach.
As everywhere needs to be involved in everything.
Yeah, cool. Okay. So there's 2 ways in which we can define this in 1 or 2 ways. We can define it by the man and his reputation. So we can talk about him being a narcissistic, populist leader who is only for himself and business perspective rather than really a proper kind of diplomatic understanding and so on. Or we could define them simply as the US, as a stand-in for the United States. The United States, the most powerful economy in the world, has decided to do this. So we should too. If we redefine Trump as simply just being a prototype of the United States, and we win that, then we start having an argument about the United States, that we take the emotional baggage of Trump out of it altogether. But if you win about the narcissistic one, which I think you would, then everything's going to be held. This idea came from an inappropriate source. And that's going to be, and we'll talk about the quality of argument, refuting arguments in a moment, and that's going to be key to it.
Sorry, Randall, I did talk about defining when I spoke about the count.
Yep.
I did say that silence is acceptance, so you don't challenge the definition by the other team. If you say silent, you would therefore default acceptance.
Informal debating is known as a drop. It's a dropped argument. And you'd actually, informal debating, lose points for doing that as well. Okay. Let's look at the idea of tariffs. How would you define tariffs?
Sorry?
Yes, you could define it as an economist would define it. Yep. Or you could define it as a penalty. Or you could define it as an incentive to stimulate. There's a bunch of different ways you can define it. Whoever's definition, as you would have heard last time, whoever's definition wins. If you drop it, if you don't satisfactory, you refute it, then that'll be what you're debating for the rest of it. The first speaker's job is to do this definition. Did you do the rest of it? Division, comparison, relationship?
I touched on it with not.
Okay, so division. What do we mean by division? We break it down into topics, we break it down into time sets, we break it down into a different way. So we could break this down into two different things, couldn't we? We could divide it into two different things. One is about following a populist lead, a political argument. And what's the other argument? An economic argument. So we can divide this up. There's two arguments here. There's a political argument and an economic argument. Let's deal with each of those first. You can put away the political argument and then just deal with the economic argument. Comparison. This is most relevant when you think your audience won't have an understanding of what this is all about and may not accept the proposition to claim. So what you might want to do is define, is there something like this that our audience would already understand that we could use to help them to understand? So we look for an alternative idea, a simile for this argument. What could it be? I don't know.
As a real stretch, you could say that if we were the team, we could turn around and say, the Jens team did this,
yep.
However, ultimately you paid more.
Yep.
Something like that.
Yep. So find some way in which we can find a comparison that the audience will accept and say, okay, well, therefore this is like this, and therefore, for instance, you'll hear people say that, I heard this in an argument, that drug testing at festivals is the same as decriminalisation of drugs. It's not relevant. It's not a good comparison. If you are going to use a comparison, it should be a good comparison. Okay, last one is relationship. When you're looking at the proposition, it is to ask, what's the relationship of this proposition to our audience and their understanding? So what we could do is argue that Australia is not like the United States. Australia is a tiny economy in comparison to that. The trade balance between the Chinese and the Americans is at multiples more than what it is here in Australia. And yet our trade deficit to China is extreme. And to take that off would actually break our economy, et cetera, et cetera. So you could say that there is no proper relationship between the two arguments. So go through, firstly, spend some time. This is like exam technique. Really understand the question before you answer it. Understand the proposition that is being put to you first, and then start to think about what you're going to do. Now you need to start building your arguments around this. once you've done this. Okay? How am I going for time? 10
We've
minutes?
got 10 minutes. As long as you like.
No.
If it was up to just tonight, you can come along. Like,
What I'll
we
do
may get
is,
trouble.
what I'll do, I think, we
Like in 10 minutes?
yes, 10 minutes, stick to our schedule today, and I'll prepare a longer session next time for.
I don't need longer.
I mean, if you require, I think we stick to our plans first.
Okay, so the couple of you who've done my class, leading on, and I'm actually getting close to the end of it. If you've done my class, you know about the guy called Toolman. You know about Toolman.
I know about
David knows about Toolman. Sue knows about Toolman. You know about Toolman? Did you do strategy with me, did you?
No.
Have you done a class with me?
No, I haven't.
I'm sure you've done a class with me.
I met you.
It's all. I had a brain CT this morning, so I'm assuming there may be some issues going on. Okay, fair enough. Okay, so Toolman is a professor and he studied argumentation, and he wrote the book on how to actually understand argument. He came up with this thing called the Toolman model. It's a way of understanding arguments. Okay, so just to break it down, we've got this idea of every argument has some form of support. It has, sometimes it's called grounds, something to back up the argument, the backing that you provide, evidence, facts, statistics, and analogies, whatever it might be. There's some sort of support. Now, essentially in a debate, we think of support, for any argument, we think of support as that which the audience understands and accepts. Okay, whenever we're providing support to an argument, it must be that which the audience understands and accepts already. In other words, we're not giving them new information. We're actually making our argument by getting them to, reminding them of what they already know, what they already accept. The other part of an argument that's critical is this idea of claim. So we've got our support and we've got our claim. What's a claim? Any idea? Because I've got to read it up here. That which an audience doesn't believe and you'll accept. Okay, so we've got a psychological process here in an argument. What we've got to do is we've got to move people from what they understand and accept to what they don't understand and accept. We've got to take them along on this journey from I get this to, okay, because I've already got this knowledge, I will now get this. We've got to work on the claim by delivering this. Has anybody come across Minto's methods? M-I-N-T-O, Barbara Minto? Yep. Situation, complication, question, answer in her process. The situation is what does your audience already know, what do they already understand, what do they already accept, same sort of process. Okay. Second? Pyramid principle, that's exactly right. Yeah. The logic and thinking in writing. Financial Times Press. It's about $110, I think. I bet Barbara better. She's not pleasant. Oh. She's a McKinsey consultant. Okay. So we move from support to claim. Now, in terms of an argument, essentially what we're doing is we're providing all these observations, all these things that the audience already understands and accepts, or could easily understand and accept. to this, which is that they don't already believe or accept. Now, so we just move them along this. We need to provide as much of this as we possibly can so that they accept our claim. In this debate that we've just been doing, what's our claim? That Australia should impose tariffs. Follow Trump, impose tariffs. Okay? Okay, so what we've got to do is we've got to actually provide some support. What would be some support we could provide? What kind of evidence or facts could we support to get them to accept that proposition?
Like indigenous goods are not, the Australians are not accepting indigenous, buying indigenous goods because they are costlier than the imported goods.
So our goods are superior but uncompetitive. Yeah. Okay, you do that. So, and most people would go, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Particularly if they're stupid, because our goods are pretty shitty actually most of the time. You know, when tariffs were in the car industry in Australia, General Motors, which was an American firm, had no tariffs on them. They were producing here in Australia really, really expensive, very ordinary cars. Because they could. So massive profit margins. The trouble is that it doesn't actually always, tariffs don't always go into the pockets of the consumer, they go into the pockets of the guy running the business. Okay, so we could do that, so we make that. So we will start thinking about this point. Now there's one thing here that we also need to really be worried about. The audience is going to actually have to think about whether they agree or they disagree. And it may be that they agree with this, but they still don't accept the claim. Why might that not be the case? Why might they agree with that but not accept the claim?
Are they in a dilemma because in the support statement they may think that those trading foods are really like top notch, but then at the same time they might think that they're not top notch, and there are some substitute products that might they might get it from China at a cheaper price, high quality goods or something like that.
Okay, so you could say, look, I believe that our goods are superior and they are uncompetitive, but I don't think tariffs are the way to actually make that better. I think there are alternative ways of doing it. In other words, what they're doing is they're not seeing a link between your support and your claim. What they're not seeing is what's called a warrant. So what we need to do is make sure that the audience, and this is the audience, this is the nth meat, this is the bit that the audience will supply. If they really know, if you really work on what they understand and accept, they will supply this. You won't need to mention it, but you need to know it's there. So when you put your arguments together and say, okay, so we're going to argue this, will my audience accept that as support for this claim? Will they warrant it? Do they perceive a link, that way, between the claim and support? Okay, so far? Let me give you a simple example of what I use in my class. Do you want to pay a rise?
Yes.
Okay.
Depends. You need to get it.
Only a woman would say that. Well, I didn't mean that in a dirty way. I meant, no. I meant that from a feminist perspective, is that men don't, forget it. Okay, so.
I do know what you're saying.
Yeah, okay. I worked hard all year. That's my support, okay? The support is, I worked hard all year. Now, what I might need to do is provide further backing to that support. I may need to provide evidence and detail about my hard work and what it's achieved and what it's done and so on. And then what I need to do is to say, have my claim, which is deserve pay rise. Any of you employees, the employers, rather? No employers here? If you were an employer and your staff member came to you and said, I worked hard all year, I deserve a pay rise, what would you say?
Yes, that's your job.
Depending on how much money I have.
Well, there's a few rebuttals in it. But I had a boss, which I did this with once, who said, not my fault.
But you didn't work hard.
No, in terms of the hard work deserving an award, I deserve a pay rise. So what we've got here is a warrant, which is hard work. You know, your parents, if you work hard, you will succeed. You'll get rewards. So there's this commonplace, this idea of something that the audience will always understand and accept, which is hard work deserves a reward. So if we take that as a syllogism, I work hard all year, hard work deserves a reward, therefore I deserve a pay rise. What we know is that the audience, will most people, will have that value built in. That's part of what we accept. It's a maxim, hard work deserves a reward. So that should generally work without us even saying that. But for some audiences, like my boss who says, not in my world, he's saying, I don't hold that value. That hard work deserves a reward. That's not the way I evaluate rewards. I evaluate the rewards from contribution or something else. Okay, so this idea of support warrant, when you're writing out your arguments, make sure you've got the really clear support, you've gone through the support from the audience's perspective, then think about, does it link to your claim, which is always going to be that which is the affirmative or that which is negative, okay? So, we've got the support, we've got the warrant, and we're making sure it's warranted to the claim. There's now the really nice thing that I think that works for this debate. Oh, one thing, we also need to think about qualifiers. How strong do we need to make this link? So we might make the qualifier being absolutely, or it might be so possibly, so we might show our strength. For many debate adjudicators, for a lot of the material that you'll present to them, they would prefer you to put a qualifier in, rather than being seen a bit arrogant in your opinion. But so if we take that, then it's highly likely that you would think that. Instead of saying, if we say that, then you will think that. Pretty highly likely, or it's possible that you will think like that, or whatever. Debaters like debate, educators like that better. Okay, last thing we need to do here in this is do what you started to do, which is called rebuttals. So what we need to do is to think, for each claim we're making, and for each, and we'll make a number of claims in support of points that we're making. For each claim we're making, what are the potential rebuttals? And you might say, I don't have the money to give you a pay rise, or it's been a bad year, or whatever. So we write down as many of these rebuttals as possible. Write them down. And then what do you do? Once you've written down the rebuttals, what do you do? Yep. So the first, yes, but the first thing to do is to answer those rebuttals. Find an answer for those, which means you can have another argument, you have a claim with support. So you need another claim support to actually argue against that, but you might decide to build that rebuttal into your own argument. If you can inoculate your opposition's arguments before they raise them, you're going to be better. So it's good to know what these are. There is one more thing you can do with this, though, and I'll finish up with this, and we can do another session if you want to. Yeah, I'll do that another time. Once we've done that, then what I used to do, this is Randal's method. It may not work for you. Is I get a piece of paper, or we do this on the whiteboard as a team, and we write down our argument on one column. So we put our argument. Now, the first thing you need to do is to write down your thesis. Now, if you're the affirmative, your thesis will be essentially the proposition. plus your main reasons why. So a thesis is a claim plus reasons. So the claim will be that proposition: we should follow Trump's lead and impose tariffs on Chinese products because 1, 2, and 3. Now, the best way of doing this is the rule of 3. Find 3 really, really good reasons to back up your argument. Every single, so you write down your thesis, first at the top. Then your first speaker. Write down what your first speaker is going to say. The first thing they're going to do is they're going to introduce you. They're going to include the thesis. They're also going to preview how the argument is going to be put across. You would have had this in the first time in terms of the overall structure. Then you write down the second speaker's points, major claims. There should only be 2 or 3, and each one of them should go back and meet that thesis. When you're doing these major claims, have you already done this, by the way? This sort of process? When you're writing this down, you're also writing down, particularly for the second and third speakers, you're starting to write down some of the rebuttals that you're going to include here that you're going to address. And then write down the third thing. Now, actually, I usually have a larger page for that. Then I have, on the other page, I try and predict their arguments. How do I think that they will be? What do I think their thesis will be? For instance, I know that they can't accept that point of view. So they're going to argue that we shouldn't follow Trump's lead and impose tariffs on that. So we know that that's the case. What kind of reasons do you think they would come up with? And you write that down. And then the easiest way to do this is to, for every one of your claims, go through and think about what would be their counterclaim. Not what their refutation of our point of view would be, but what would be the alternative argument. And if you've gone through this kind of process, you've already got that there. And you list that down. Now, what will happen is that this should be 100% correct at the end of the debate. You should follow this perfectly. This is likely to be about 50% correct because people they never do what you think you're going to do. All right, so what we need to do when we start a debate, in terms of strategies for winning it, is the first thing we've got to do is make sure that we think about it as all we need to do in this debate is not to counter the other's argument, not to actually put on a good show. It's not about being the greatest presenter since Martin Luther King. It's about making sure I really communicate to the adjudicators and to my audience that we are the most likely to be right in this situation. That it is most certain to vote for us, least certain to vote for them. That the argument here that we're putting across is about understanding our audience and what they will accept. Persuasion, all persuasion is self-persuasion. The second thing that I think is really important in putting all this together is once we've got that good understanding of our audience, and it's really easy to do, we just write down what we think their attitudes and values are. We know our audiences pretty well. We know what the structure of the debate is going to be like, so it shouldn't take very long. You can do that well before you get into the debate competition. Because once you do that, the second thing to do is to actually then consider that proposition from the audience's perspective and start thinking about how do we analyse this debate in the way that they might analyse it. What would they think about Trump? What would they think about American economic and foreign policy? What would they think about China and the Chinese products and their pursuit to be the dominant superpower of the world? What do we think about their tariffs and whether they'd be good for the economy? What would they think and so on? Not from what your arguments would be, but what do you think their arguments would be? And start with that information, because that then is going to build the various arguments that you're going to use to support your claim. So, for example, if you know that they think that Trump is a buffoon, then you're obviously going to say, well, as you know, Trump is a buffoon. Therefore, anything he might say is going to be problematic and so on. Okay? So, a different way of thinking for many people. It's not about the show. It's not about the performance as such. It is more about making sure that you are communicating to your audience. You're not presenting to your audience and putting an argument. It's, in a sense, it's a dialogue. It's a give and take between you and your adjudicator and your audience. It's not about you up there alone trying to get across a good show. And that makes it much more comfortable for you. Last point. 10 minutes over, I'm so sorry. Is talk about running out of time. So quality of debate from an adjudicator's perspective is more on agreement than it is on disagreement. Your job is not to disagree in a debate. Your job is really to agree. Find the points that your opposition makes which you can agree upon. Find the propositions that they can take that you agree upon. Find the things, particularly between you and your audience, that you can agree upon, and reinforce those and work with those. And the more you can do that, the better. But once you've agreed the opposition's point of view is correct, you've then got to show that the conclusion it leads to is unacceptable or uncertain. So yes, tariffs could lead to a much more booming manufacturing industry in Australia, but at the expense of blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So find points of agreement. You look much more reasonable. And the last thing to say is try and appear like you don't care whether you win. It's really not about winning and losing. It's about making sure that we've really gone through this critically and thought about the ramifications of our actions, etc. Okay, thank you. One more shot. So, yes, sorry, there was one question.
No, the last one, last sentence which you said, the ramification.
The ramifications of accepting their point of view. So if you accept their point of view, then show what that would mean and take them to a bad place. Okay? So yes, we can accept that tariffs will grow our manufacturing industry, but at the expense of our economy overall and our relationship with China and other buddies, or with New Taiwan, etc. Okay. Did you get to the evaluation?
No, not so. I dare not. I dare not. I am
sorry, sorry for 10 minutes too long.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you so much.
That's all right, no problem. And to explain what I just said.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. All right, thank you. I'll see you later.
All right. Well, to continue the formalities, well, to proceed with the last bit, last 10% of this evening, we in Toastmasters have a tradition of calling the and R counter and the timers report at the end. Just to give you a quick understanding of what an and R counter is, well, every time a person gives a speech, just like I've been deliberately doing ums, ahs, and more than that, any kind of linking words, there are these nuances which we pick up on. We tell the speaker that this is your and R count. So for the next speech, and whenever you're doing a prepared speech, or even an unprepared speech, you work upon it and you try to get better with that. The whole idea of the timer's report is to give you an assessment of how can you assess or use your time a little better, either by underutilizing it or overutilizing it. It's always good to be on time, on point. So I'll invite Abhishek and Sue, both of them together, to quickly give an and R report and also the timer's report. While they will be giving that, each one of you will have such a small tiny slip on your table. If you all have it, if you don't, let me know, I'll give it to you. If you could please put in your vote for the best prepared speaker for today. If you see right here, that is the best prepared speech. If you just cast your vote and give it to me, we will give an award for the person who voted to be the best prepared speech.
About yourself?
Oh yeah, excluding
It's
Randal.
anonymous.
It is excluding Randal because he's giving the education, so we will give it to John and Oliver. And well, I hand it over to you both.
Thanks. So we are going to talk about the timings. Pavitra, it was a big speech, considering the fact that you have started off your just book drive today. It's for you. It's like 4 minutes 29 seconds. Going by the general comments, you've done a good one, and you can always improvise on it. And coming to John, it was 9 minutes 52 seconds. Factoring the time video time, so it stands out to 9 minutes 52 seconds.
Thank you, Abhishek. I'd like to give a report on ums and ahs counting. For Pavitra, there were 13 ahs and 3 ums. For John, there were 2 so's and 2 ums. And lastly, Randal, there were 5 ums. And stop counting. I stopped counting after 5 months. I just dropped the pen. And so it was overall very good performance, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you both of you. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Vijay. We're just collecting the votes. If anyone is left with their vote, please give it to Ashley. She's right behind you, behind all of us. And the support she's been behind all of us. And Konika had the last vote, is that? And anyone else left? Right. Actually, if you could just count it up and sure, I've got one more. Just one more word. Okay, that's good. And we got the suspense. While the suspense is on and they're doing the counting, I'll give the last bit of it. Just a few quick updates on the most controversial name MGSM Cup, which might turn into something else right now. One good news for all of you, those who want to still be a part of a team, we are extending the deadlines to next Wednesday. We will soon update it on our social media. We'll get mails to you guys because we have quite a few individual participants who still want to be grouped into teams. So we thought we'll give one more week for everyone to be a part of the team. Just to quickly tell you about how this will be handled. Should we get more than 4 teams, which we already have, there will be a round robin concept put up. That is, teams will pitch against each other. You will compete against each other, and only 4 teams make it to the final. So there will be 4 teams who will be selected basis of winning. They will go to the finals, and on the final night, there will be 3 rounds. That is, 2 teams against each other, sets of 2. The winning 2 teams go on to the final round. Right? That will be the team. Just to remind you, every team requires minimum 4 people. 3 will be as in the role of speakers who will actually go out and present their points. 1 person will be the pillar support, that is as a researcher. The role of researcher is to constantly create arguments, support their team, get more facts on board. Also, while the debate is on, the researcher will be pretty much active. He'll be on the dais trying to pinpoint the rebutting sessions, the rebutting arguments of the opposite team. So the researcher's role doesn't end when the team goes onward. Rather, the researcher is very much a part of the team, even on stage, except for the speaking part. So that's the idea. Well, if we have the vote, we have the winner. I would like to invite our president, Bhushan, to declare the winners.
So the award for best speaker goes to John.
Sorry. If we could have a photo. And one from the front, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we here at Toastmasters International would like to acknowledge new members who joined the club. So we have a new member, Pavitra, who joined our club and is given us first icebreaker. So I'd like to invite Pavitra on stage and acknowledge him as a member of our club.
It's stuck in the pocket.
Yeah, this goes on to and then one of this. One more, please.
Got it. Work. Okay.
With this, I declare the end of the meeting, and we will meet on 2nd. See you then. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. Cool. There was some stuff.
See you. Nice meeting you.
See you. Nice meeting you. Yeah.
University's not going to move his office. He's losing his office. He's not going to look at the cubicle
Yes, I'm around. You come around, I walk in and there's something to the
Absolutely. So what do you do? You're very qualified. Then we definitely this is unique. You have to know this. And this is the proposed rate and your policy is if it happens in the policy, there is no need for early and that's true. This message becomes some massive half an hour so that you get the topic started. And secondly, in half an hour, construct the argument. This is nothing worse than spending the next 5 years. You start your number one. That's the hardest, right? Then the next speaker one is you start with Jeremiah and supervisor.
You can't take it.